Hi, welcome back to the Personality Hacker Podcast. My name is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
I want you to imagine the end of your life as you are on your quote-unquote deathbed. And you're looking out at the council of people that all of us face on our deathbed. We get to that one room, that one room that we all know is coming for us, where everybody that told us what to do throughout our life is sitting there. Our parents are in that room, our teachers, our professors, our friends, our colleagues. Every single person that we have gotten advice from or heard direction from is sitting there, and they're judging us and judging our life. They've got clipboards in their hand. You know what I'm talking about, right? You've seen this in movie after movie. You know it's coming for you. They've got clipboards, and they've got a checklist of all the things you did right or wrong on their list. And each person's got their own checklist that's measuring your life against their checklist. Your parents have their checklist. Your friends have their checklist. Your professors have their checklist. Politicians have their checklist. Everybody's got their checklist of all the things you were supposed to do to live a good life and be a successful person. And your question is, will I pass the test? On these checklists, will everybody check, I did a good job all the way down? Now, you might say, Joel, I have no idea what you're talking about. I've never seen a movie with that scenario. I've never seen a scene like that in any kind of fiction or work of fiction. I've never heard anybody even talk about that before. And yet, we all live our lives as if this is what's going to happen at the end. Like, there's going to be people that are there waiting to approve or disapprove of our behavior. Now, we get a little bit of this from religious teachings, right? We've got this God in heaven or some afterlife, this deity that's going to judge our behaviors on earth after we exit this life. So we have a little bit of this in our consciousness, but why do we assume that we're going to be judged by the people around us? Certainly the people we were born with, like our parents, aren't going to be there at the end of our life, most likely. They're going to be long dead before we die. If we live a long life and die of natural causes, they will most likely, barring any technology development, they will most likely die before us. So certainly they're not going to be there to measure our lives. And yet we let their voices, even after their death sometimes, rattle in our heads and tell us what we should or shouldn't be doing. And we have to measure up to these people that aren't even around half the time of our lives. And so I want you to imagine right now getting to your deathbed, and actually there is no council with clipboards there, right? Because this is the reality. This is the reality. There's going to be nobody there that told you what to do and told you to make this thing happen or do this thing or be this way in your life. You betted on these people being there at the end to give you the results, to give you the metric for the test. And they're not going to be there. It was a bad bet. It was a terrible bet. I say, instead of doing that, instead of betting on those people and betting on the outside systems around you, betting on the advice you get from everybody else, I say use that advice, absorb it, listen to it, don't tune it out, but place the bets on yourself. Bet on your own life. Bet on your own intelligence. Bet on your own emotions. Bet on your own intentions and your own projects. That's what I say. I say if you bet on yourself, the person that's actually going to measure your life will be there on your deathbed. And that's you. You'll have your own clipboard of your own making, of your own list, to determine, was my life good or bad? Was it worth something? Did I build something that I'm proud of? And you're the only one that will be able to measure that at the end of your life, truly for yourself.
Yeah, that clipboard won't be an actual clipboard. It will just be a feeling. It will be a feeling of regret or a feeling of a life well lived. I think the other thing, that's really interesting, Joel. We didn't talk about you mentioning any of that before we hit record, and I've just been kind of watching you give this motivational sort of reframe. And the thing that came up for me as you were talking is that I do think that there is a part of us that believes that people are going to measure whether or not we lived up to their advice. But I think the opposite of this, or not the opposite, but the other unconscious, I don't know, like hint or feeling we get, maybe it's not a belief, but it's just sort of like an intuition, an instinct, a feeling in the gut of us, is this idea that they'll answer for it too. Like we handed ourselves over to their rules, their perspectives, their worldviews, what they thought was going to be the way. And none of those people will be at the end answering for it either.
You mean they've got our backs? Is what you're saying. Like they'll be there to say, yeah, good job, and I got your back. Good choice.
Or that if their advice wasn't right, that they will be there to apologize.
Gotcha.
And to answer for it and to reconcile with you, which they won't be that either. Every person you've ever listened to and absorbed their perspective of reality, not understood it, not seen it from their worldview, but determined that whatever it was that they had to say was a more important voice than your own, was a more quality way of seeing reality, was something that you had to hand yourself over to. None of those people will be there to answer for the consequences of your life if it didn't turn out well. They are just doing the best they can. And they have the same instinct inside of them. This word, I couldn't figure out a good word because it's such a nebulous concept. It's like, it's just this sort of feeling you get. It's not a real actual thought. Like, these people will be at the end of my life, either cheering me on, giving me approval, or answering for the terrible advice they gave me. They just won't be there, right? There's just nothing there at the end. So the only person that you travel the totality of your life with is yourself. You're the only person that was there at your birth, and you're the only person that will be there at your death. I mean, the only exception would be conjoined twins, but even that person isn't occupying your brain, right? You're the only one inside your own mind the entire time. So this idea of what you said, Joel, betting on yourself, I think what you're effectively saying is that there's a lot of uncertainty that we experience as people. And we've said this before in the podcast, the easiest way to be brainwashed is to be born. Like, if we are not brainwashed, ergo socialized, then we become feral and we have no opportunities in front of us. So we have to be socialized. We have to hand ourselves over to the context and environment around us in order to even be capable of thought.
Yeah, to know that we're brainwashed, we have to be brainwashed.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the crazy paradox of life, is that if you aren't brainwashed, you don't get to a place of transcending brainwashing. And we never fully transcend it. But that said, a part of that uncertainty and handing oneself over to the environment, a part of that gets real sticky inside of us. We don't know that we can transcend it. We don't know that all of that programming stays inside of us. We start to think, oh, that's my thought. That's my authentic thought. That's how I see the world. I made this, that little cartoon online where somebody says, I made this, and hands it to the other person, and they just look at it for a panel and they go, I made this, right? I think that's supposed to illustrate a concept of creativity, that people tend to steal things and make them their own when it comes to creative work. But I don't think this applies to thoughts too, right? I thought this, and the other person looks at it for a while and goes, I thought this, this is my thought. And so we're in this terrible conundrum. We're in this terrible conundrum of having to start our lives out by absorbing everything around us in order to be complete people eventually. But then at some moment having to transcend that absorption and having to take a moment and deconstruct ourselves and everything we're thinking and go, okay, but what do I believe that's outside of all of this programming? What's actually authentic and honest for me? That is not an easy place to find yourself in, because the answer is, well, you're going to be an amalgamation of a bunch of information that is already available to you. You're never going to be able to have completely original thoughts. That's not even available as human beings. But we can personalize them. We can understand our individual perspective on all of this. When they talk about art, right, they talk about artists having a point of view. I see this a lot in like fashion. It took me a long time to try to figure out what that meant. Well, your clothing has a point of view. And I'm like, how does clothing have a point of view? I didn't get it until I watched like 15 episodes of Project Runway. And then I was like, okay, now I understand what that means to have a point of view when it comes to clothing. It's your own unique take, even though you're making the same clothing over and over and over again. That is just like the general wardrobe of humans. Eventually, you find your own voice in all of it. You find your point of view. And as people, there's a moment, or there's an availability of finding our point of view. What's unique to us? We're iterating on the same things over and over that all humans iterate on. But what's my unique voice? What's my point of view? And when you say bet on yourself, Joel, I think what you're saying is give yourself permission to have your point of view. Give yourself permission to bet on that point of view, to have a sense of direction that is your own, to have a sense of agency and sovereignty, which comes along with that. And of course, agency and sovereignty require responsibility, right? That you take up the mantle, that you have to answer for your choices at the end of your life. And you're not looking around for all the people who told you how to live, and they're just not there to answer for it themselves. You answer for your point of view the entire time. But you're advocating to bet on that, to take up the mantle of that, to say, I'm going to do that for myself. And so the only person that I have to answer to at the end of days is the only person who's going to be with me there anyway, myself.
I think betting on yourself, you could also say investing in yourself. I like betting because it's just an exciting word. It sounds like, high roller, and you're a high roller in life and betting on your own life. I think it's kind of interesting. But we could say investing in ourselves. Let's talk about what we're not saying, though. We're not saying be extra opinionated. We're not talking about being an opinionated person and having, I have my viewpoint. I have my perspective. It's like, okay, yeah, do you have anything to back that up with? Like, we're not just talking about just spreading your opinions everywhere, like coughs or sneezes. That's not exactly what we're speaking to. I think we're also not saying pick yourself up by your bootstraps. You might hear this message and say, oh, okay, one of these messages again, I see. I can't rely on other people. I can't rely on systems. I have to just pull myself up by my bootstraps. And if I can't do that, then I'm, SOL. Like, that's not what we're saying either. I'm not suggesting you have to go alone and be completely isolated from other people, or not have support, not have ideas, not have coaches, not have partners throughout your life, both business and personal. I'm talking about the idea that you just mentioned, Antonia. You're the only one that's going to be there at the end. And so that's the only person that you can actually count on being there. So play to the metrics that matter to you, because that's who's going to measure it all. And I think that that's a little different than pulling yourself up from your bootstraps. I think you can still interface with others and still have them support you and you support them. It's betting on yourself, though, having respect enough for yourself to prioritize the things you're putting into the world that matter to you. And I think it's not ignoble what people do. They just think that it's going to come someday. Like, at some point, after all the problems out here are fixed, after this trauma's gone, after I satisfy this social group or this religious paradigm I came from, like, I got to put all the work, I got to do all these things. I'll defer my life. And then someday maybe I can do the thing that I really want to do, or I want to output on. I'll bet on myself someday in the future. I think people do want to bet on themselves. I think it's a desire of us as humans. But we tend to delay it because we get so many messages from everybody else that, no, you should do what I want you to do. You should do this thing over here. You should buy into this cause, XYZ up here, because that's the thing that really matters. And everybody around you's doing it, and you're like, oh man, maybe if I want to be significant, if I want to get the likes on YouTube or Instagram stuff, I better buy into this thing and make sure I put it on my channel, my posts. I got to put the right message out there so everybody knows I'm okay. I'm not, I'm not part of it all. And I think that, like, we're getting distracted. You don't respect yourself enough to go your own path, to go the journey that's designed for you as a created being in this world, tuning the channels that speak to you. You're borrowing from other people. And I've done this too. I'm preaching to myself a lot here, right? I've done this too in my life. But the older I get, the more I tune to things that matter to me personally, that I actually care about. And I realize, wait a second, there's no group of people that's going to be there to measure me at the end of it all. I'm it. Why am I doing this for a bunch of people that aren't even going to support me, apologize if they gave me the wrong advice or any of that stuff? Like, that's crazy. That's a disrespect of myself. I'm disrespecting myself continuing to do that.
Yeah, you're talking about virtue signaling. And virtue signaling is, I think, a synthetic version of self-empowerment. Meaning that if you signal the right virtues and you get feedback that you're on the right path, then there's this sense of, like, I'm doing the right thing. And because of that, by virtue of the fact that I have good virtues or the right virtues, then I must be powerful and empowered and doing the right thing. And what's interesting is that sometimes it's hard to create a distinction between when somebody is doing what we're talking about, which is taking up the mantle on things that really mean something to them. Something that I don't think you're necessarily saying, Joel, that you abandon all causes or you abandon all paradigms, right? You don't abandon necessarily a deeply held authentic religious view or a deeply held activist view or whatever it is, right? Political view. It's not like you abandon the things that truly mean something to you. It's this idea of, I don't actually know what means something to me. And so I think I'm supposed to have things mean something to me, so I'm going to just throw out the thing that is an approximation. I'm going to circle the drain here and put out these messages that may or may not be my thing, but these are the people I want to associate with myself with, and these are the people that I want to get approval from. And I'm doing that thing that we're talking about, which is at the end of my life, maybe these are the people who will either approve of me or account for whether or not this was the right way to go.
Yeah, and I'll use a counterintuitive example here, because usually when we're talking about this, it's like the message from personal growth teachers or people that have podcasts like ours is, you are a unique, beautiful snowflake. You're meant for so much. You should take over the world and save everything. And it's been my experience, especially in the last few months and years doing mentorships and coaching. We're doing many more one-on-one and group coaching and mentorships with people. A lot of people are just saying, like, I feel like I have to live this epic life and change the world, but that's not authentic to me. Like, it's not authentic to go and try to save XYZ and fix all these things. It's authentic to me to love the people around me that are close to me and maybe be a small leader in my town or community or in my church or social group and rise to that occasion. And that's really what I think I'm put on earth to be. But everybody's telling me I've got to take up this big, epic thing to mean something in the world. And so, I'm almost saying, like, it's okay to live a small leadership life. You don't have to necessarily lead the world towards something. You could lead your community towards something. And that's okay because it's the thing that you're going to measure yourself later with. You don't have to feel anxious about that. Like, I should be traveling places and doing all these extra things. And that's not for you. That's for other people that resonates with. It's okay to live more of a regular existence, loving the people around you and contributing where you can.
Yeah, not everybody has to live an Instagram influencer's life.
Exactly.
In either, like you said, travel or in accomplishment or in signaling or whatever it is.
Not everybody's epic life looks the same.
Right, exactly.
Like your epic life may not play well on social media.
Yeah.
And people go, wow, that's an epic life. But to you, it may be a very epic life. You might be living the most optimized, epic experience you have available to you. And you're on purpose, passion, and mission, and you're loving every minute of it and your joyfulness. And other people might look at it and go, that's nothing. Like, that's nothing to me. Like, I don't think that's epic at all. And you got to be okay with that, is what I'm saying. Bet on yourself in those scenarios.
Yeah, get a feel for what is truly why you're here, right? What is in the last podcast, we talked about this concept of destination or destiny, which is fundamentally the same. It has the same root word. And part of the root word of that is what is your purpose? What is your function? Like, why are you this unique perspective of the universe? What is and when I say point of view, I'm glad that you created a distinction between that and opinions, right? What is my opinion on everything? Which I actually think that we are oversaturated by opinions. I think everybody's opinion is, what did they say? It was like worth the piece of paper it's printed on, right? And so I'm not talking about opinions. I'm talking about checking in with yourself and determining what is a truly purpose-filled life for you as an individual, separate from all the messaging you've been given, maybe generational messaging. I've noticed this very much. I think it's actually quite sad what we did to millennials. We told them that they had to save the world. And so a lot of millennials have a hero complex. They believe that they have to save the world. Otherwise, they're not, quote unquote, doing their part. Not realizing that people said that aspirationally to them. I think the message that was intended to be given was, if you want to do something, we're not going to be synthetic obstructions to that. We are going to pave the way for you as a generation to do whatever you want to do, to manifest whatever you want to manifest. I think it was intended to be a message of cheerleading, but it ended up becoming a message of crushing responsibility. And it's not anybody's job to save the world. I mean, personally, I don't think anybody can save the world. I don't even think it's realistic. I think we're all fantasists if we think that we're going to be able to save the world with any particular technique, worldview, belief structure, and it's certainly not going to happen through social media. I mean, I'm starting to see social media as the equivalent to, agriculture. There's a strong argument in the book Sapiens that while agriculture definitely facilitated a lot of things in our life, there's a strong argument to be made that it actually destroyed humanity at the same time, or at least set us on a path of self-destruction. I would say social media is a beautiful thing. There are a lot of things about social media, kind of like farming, right? There's a lot of benefits that come from farming, agriculture. There's a lot of benefits that come from social media. And also it might eventually be our doom. So routing back to the original point, which is that I think we did a disservice. I think every generation has had a disservicing message given to them. And betting on yourself means getting past all of that programming, getting past the social messages that were given to you, finding where you resonate in a cacophony of messages, a cacophony of advice. If you listen to this podcast and you're like, I think they're full of crap, bet on yourself. right? Bet on yourself. There is a lot of noise being thrown at people, and finding the center, that quiet center of yourself, listening to yourself, your individuated or your perpetually individuated self, away from all the rest of society, all those people who will not be with you at your deathbed. Finding the quiet voice within that gives you a sense of resonance with what direction you're supposed to go, with what you're supposed to accomplish in this lifetime, whatever that could be. It could be raising a really nice family. It could be creating a tribe of, really internet connected people who all love each other. It could be building a business. It could be going to a day job and then really enjoying your life afterwards with hobbies. It doesn't have to be this major thing. That said, it does need to be a place of agency and self-responsibility. So I think one of the reasons why we don't bet on ourselves, why we outsource a lot of our life choices to others, is because we know it does come along with responsibility. We know that at the end of our lives, we are the person we're going to answer to. And that creates a bit of existential nervousness, right? Like, I'm going to have to answer to myself, and I don't know if that future self is going to be happy with the choices I made. And I can just kick that can in perpetuity, right? Maybe I won't die with self-knowledge. Maybe I'll go fast. Maybe I won't have to take an accounting with myself. But there's this really uncomfortable feeling I think we can get when we realize that we are, like, the buck stops here, and we are going to have to answer to ourselves for our choices. And what if we're not qualified? What if we make the wrong ones? What if we made a life choice that we got stuck in and that wasn't the right thing? Maybe I should listen to everybody else. Maybe the outside world has all that knowledge and information for me, and they're the ones who can be responsible for my life choices because I followed their advice. And the challenge with that is the abdication of responsibility means that we're allowing uncertainty and insecurity to carve our path for us. We are resting into our uncertainty more than we're resting into our agency. It is an understandable choice to make because all of us are deeply uncertain. Just looking at the moment and the timeline in which we all exist, we are not ready for this world as humans, right? We evolve as or not just as individuals, we evolve as a species much slower than our technology. Our technology outpaces us in ways that makes our biological head spin. And so because of that, there is a lot of reason for uncertainty. And we can still bet on ourselves, but we have to shut out all the noise. We have to get away from the technology. We have to get away from the cacophony of voices and advice and all of that. We have to get present with ourselves and into quiet places and ask ourselves, what is it that I really want? And we have to do it enough times for our inner voice to give us an answer. So it's not like one session of forest bathing is going to do it. It's not like one drive where we decided not to listen to a podcast on that drive is going to do it. We have to be quiet and alone with ourselves over and over and over and over again in a world that is insistent on us being plugged in to something that's noisy. So betting on ourselves means that we have to give ourselves the opportunity and space to even hear what that point of view is. We have to detangle ourselves from this world that wants our eyeballs and our eardrums, that wants us to be paying attention to everything but ourselves. We have to get past that. We have to transcend that world to get quiet, to get present, to hear ourselves. And then once we get that message, and it takes a while. This is why people go, meditation is the way to go. Well, sometimes it's not meditation. For some people, meditation is very difficult. For some people, it's long drives of silence. For some people, it's long walks of silence. The silence is the important thing, though. You can be active and in action as long as you are silent and not inputting content. And once you get into that place often enough, suddenly these really discreet voices start bubbling up. The you that has been buried under all of this noise, you can start hearing it. And when you hear that and you hear yourself and your points of view come out, that's the you need to be betting on.
We will be right back. If you're focused on personal growth, I think you'll resonate with our core content over at personalityhacker.com. We want to see you understand how your mind is wired so you can generate motivation, improve social skills, find career opportunities, and master excellent decision making. But a quick warning, we are advice and action focused in all of our articles, podcasts, and videos. This means that we attract people who like to be challenged to become excellent, to take action, to put in the work to optimize themselves, not simply just gather more information. If you are committed to personal growth and ready to radically find your inner truth, then come over and be a part of our growing community of like minds at Personality Hacker. Now back to the show. Basically, we're talking about this in a philosophical way, Antonia, an abstract way, which is that I set this up by saying the deathbed metaphor of the clipboards and people waiting to measure you at the end of your life. But there's a much more immediate, applicable, tangible expression of this. And at risk of sounding like a crazy person, so just take that into account for a second, I think that recent events in the past several years, when there was a global pandemic and we went into lockdowns, I watched so many people look to their left and right and observe what other people were doing and just follow the crowd to behavior. And then some people had radical independent streaks and basically just did the opposite of the crowd, almost in reaction to the crowd, what they were doing. It was crazy to me. I was like watching people go in these polarized ways. So that was very interesting to see how polarized people are. Both sides, I think, are in reaction to others. I don't think most people were thinking for themselves at all because they're just reacting. That's my personal opinion. And again, at risk of sounding crazy, I'm talking about betting on yourself in a much shorter timeline as well, not just the if all systems are going well and we have time to sit in the car and drive down the freeway and ruminate about our lives and the meaning of it, that's the channel of life that talks about meaning and meaning making and all the current of life. That's that aspect. But what about the tangible here and now part of life? Like, what happens if the next time this global situation happens, the supply lines go down and we don't have electricity coming to our house, or we don't have a food supply, or there's no car to drive down and ruminate and meditate in, or think about these thoughts and let things bubble up because we don't have access to, again, sounding like a crazy person, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I'm saying that if you bet on yourself, even in those scenarios, you're going to be better off than betting on others or the system at large. And again, some of my Gen X nature is coming in here because we tend to, as Gen Xers, take our tools with us. We tend to keep the tools on our tool belt, metaphorically and literally. And we like to have all of our skills with us and not have to be so tied into a system. And I would argue that based on the system disruptions, the systems are pretty good because the disruption was great in the last few years. It recovered, but how many more hits like that can a system absorb before it starts to break down? I think betting on yourself, both in the immediate practical level and the abstract future orientation level, are both ways that we need to be doing it as humans, not just one or the other.
You're talking about like radical self-reliance.
That's right. And it's a philosophy of it, not just like learn how to like grow food in your backyard, although that might be the skill you develop. It's the mentality of, if the food supply goes down, I can figure this out. I have the resources. I've bet on myself. Maybe I don't know how to do it yet, but I'll figure it out. I'm going to make this happen. I'm not going to just surrender and die. Like, I'm going to figure it out. And I think that's what I'm talking about. Yeah, radical self-reliance in a attunement way. You may not be able to build all the skill, but knowing like, I'm going to be the one that gets me through this. Because, you can hire as many coaches as you want in the world to help you overcome your problems, your challenges. You can talk to as many friends. You can get as much advice. You can read as many articles. You can understand your personality at every possible aspect and level. You can understand the personality of your index finger versus your pinky finger, right? If you get down to that abstract level of understanding. And yet you're the only one that can actually take all of that knowledge, all of that understanding, all of that advice, and turn it into some kind of action that moves your life forward in the world.
Yeah, I agree. And I don't know if we're saying different things. I mean, I know that you're like, you said something to the effect of, well, what if you don't have time for that? And I wouldn't say you sound like a conspiracy theory. It sounds a little apocalyptic. And I don't know. I don't know what's going to come up in the future. So maybe things will go down to Mad Max Road. Maybe I'm open to that. I don't know how well I'll survive, but I will bet on myself. I will try. I will attempt, because I know as a podcaster talking about personality types, I won't really be very valuable in that ecosystem. So I do think that there is something to be said for building skills and tools underneath the more, sort of in the relationship one has with themselves on an introspective level, I do think that listening to those discrete voices, getting quiet, like, yeah, you're right. If it all goes Mad Max, you're not going to have a lot of time to drive to, 30 minutes and ruminate.
There's no lattes to go pick up.
Yeah. And we do right now, right? And I don't think when you said that, I was like, do you mean like if a person's life is too hectic? I don't think anybody's life is too hectic. And if it is, you got to free up some time in your schedule. Like, I don't know if it means getting up 30 minutes earlier. I don't know if it means going to bed a little later. I don't know if it means adjusting things to make sure you have that time. I think it's just turning off the device, right? Most people have the time to do this. They just need to turn off the device. And that's what affords them this extra time to ruminate on the self. And when a person creates a relationship with themselves through this quietness, through listening to these discrete voices that give them an ability to choose a direction, to know what the next choice should be, or the purpose, or why you're here as an individual, and you start to teach yourself to listen to those voices. You teach yourself to feel that sense of responsibility that you can't just absorb or osmose what the world has to offer and then just know the right call, or perpetually hand yourself over to distractions or what the group is doing, whether that is following things blindly or reacting blindly, whether that's somebody who is being obedient or somebody who's being rebellious. Like you mentioned, there's a lot of different ways to play this, and people play this in a lot of different ways when they're in reaction to world events. And that sometimes gives you a really good idea of how you react and respond to the things around you. Like, that gives you a bit of a hint to what kind of person you are. Are you a person who, like, sort of in these moments doesn't get into reaction, doesn't immediately post whatever's your little, piece of flair on your Twitter handle or whatever in support of this thing that you heard about and immediately know how you feel about it? Do you kind of give yourself a minute to go, okay, how do I actually think about this thing? How should I feel about this? And by should, I mean, what does my inner discrete voice tell me? When you do that, you start to honor that person. You start to honor that inner wisdom and that inner voice, that discrete voice. And then you feel a sense of responsibility to it. You feel a sense of responsibility to yourself, which creates self-responsibility. When you have self-responsibility, now you're entering a place where you realize, well, you're the person who is responsible the entire time. And when we talk about this idea of betting on yourself, at the moment you take radical self-responsibility, you're not waiting for anything in the outside world to change to suit you. You're not waiting for anything in the outside world to carve a path. The outside world is fickle, right? It goes based on its own point of view. The outside world is filled with points of view in both the discrete way and also in the opinionated way. The systems around us, sometimes they help facilitate us and sometimes they keep us down. The systems around us are sometimes buoying us up and sometimes they're creating great oppression. Like, the systems around us they're fickle too. They go based on what they want. So when you get to a place of radical self-responsibility, I don't think it's I don't think it's a bridge too far at that point to also think in terms of radical self-reliance. And if a person ends up with that mentality, maybe they do start to think in terms of like, well, then how do I build the skills I need to build to be able to deal with any context that gets thrown at me? But I think the important thing is to take the locus of control away from the outer world, the external world, and to bring it in-house. And this is, in some ways, you mentioned before, you might sound like a crazy person. This is almost a dangerous message right now. Every time I talk about radical self-reliance and taking personal responsibility, it's really interesting to hear the pushback I get. I get a lot of pushback around how that's the wrong way to see things. That in some ways it's like an irresponsible way to see things. Like, we have to hand ourselves over to the outside world. We have to hand ourselves over to these systems and care about them and try to save the world. And I think it's because we've been pre-programmed for that. We've been propagandized into believing saving the world is, first, available. It's a possibility. And two, it's our personal responsibility to make it happen. And we haven't really tapped into that idea that, well, when you change yourself, you change the world. that concept of be the change you want to see, manifest it through your behavior and your actions, model it for other people. Stop beating them over the head with the things that you want and become a version of it that inspires others to want to head that direction. But that means that you have to bring all of this in-house. And I think that's a part of betting on yourself too. You bet on your ability to become and manifest the thing you want to see in the world. And then you become a guide, right? You become a mile marker along somebody else's path that goes, oh, I could be that. I could do that, right? You're an inspiration to others. And then they can take that inspiration and go, okay, well, what's my version of it? And then if we do that enough, all of a sudden things start shifting and changing. But like I said, I don't think we can save the world. So the things that shift and change are in your world, in your life. And that's really the only thing you have control over, or actually not even control, you have influence over. So betting on yourself is also betting on your ability to become and manifest the things you want to see in the world. So it's a sense of listening to oneself, hearing your true nature start to bubble up and whisper to you with these discreet voices, to start listening and not handing yourself over to uncertainty and handing yourself over to others, but taking it in-house, making yourself the locus of control, betting on your ability to be successful in all of this, betting on your ability to make the right choices for your life, betting on yourself that at the end of your life, you're not going to look back and be disappointed, that you're going to be happy with the things you did, betting on yourself to determine your own virtues and not signal virtues to get other people's approval. And then also betting on yourself to be able to manifest all of this, to become the version of reality that you would like to see. I think all of that is, I think that personal responsibility piece, I think it's absolutely critical. And I don't think we're going to see any shifts in the world until we as individuals, and by we, I don't mean the collective we, I mean as an individual person, we won't even be able to experience those changes until we change ourselves. We won't even be able to see how things have changed because we project our image of reality onto the outside world. So until we change, even if the outside world did change, we wouldn't even be able to see it.
I think we're still in the abstract, distant future. And I know I framed it this way, right? Deathbed thinking, but that's still too far down the road. I need to move that up. What if your deathbed's tonight? Let's do that. Let's say, instead of thinking like at the end of your life, what about the end of your day? Today is your deathbed. And you're going to sit on it and say, what was the measure of what I did? Did I bet on myself today? I'm not deferring until the end of my life to measure, was today good or bad? Did I do well? Did I build stuff I want to build? Like you can reflect on it right now, tonight, when you lay your head down and review today and the past life you've lived up until this point. And I want to continue to bring the practicality to this idea, not just an abstraction of like I think you're not wrong, Antonia. I think there's a philosophical, let the true essence of who you are bubble up and all this stuff that you want to tend to and tune to and do in your quote unquote big epic life. But life is not lived in a big epic way in the future. It's lived right now in this moment. It's lived by the breakfast I ate this morning, the lunch I ate a few hours ago, the dinner I'll eat tonight. Like it's defined by the things I'm doing right now. And so I think that's what I'm talking about is bet on yourself in those moments too. And I used an extreme example of the systems breaking down. Maybe that was too far to the other side. But the point I'm making is you're living today. You're not living tomorrow. And you can only measure today by today's standards and where you're at. And I say bet on that right here and right now. One way to do that, I think, is a test iterate process. One way to do this is to test things. And I don't mean half measures. I don't mean like, I think this thing's important to me. I'm going to tweet about it. I'm going to do a video about it. I'll speak my opinion. I'll articulate something. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about actually doing something about it. And so I think this is where we can test iterate. You know, in the last episode, I talked about those currents or channels of reality, right? We talked about this idea that the 8 cognitive functions, let's say in personality types, could metaphorically represent a different channel or energy of reality. And you, as a unique personality, are wired to be attentive to a few of these. And if you attend to them and build skill in them, you're going to see tons of results in your life and tons of happiness and joy. And you're betting on yourself. And I think that's what I'm talking about. So how do you know not only what channels those are? You kind of know it based on your personality, but what do you do in those channels of energy? Like what exactly should I do there? Well, you're going to have to set up some challenges for yourself, some ideas on, well, I think I'm in this channel of energy. I'm going to challenge myself in this way. I'm going to test it, get real world feedback by action, not by articulation, demonstration, not articulation. I'm going to get feedback for that. Oh, it didn't work as well. I'm going to calibrate. I'm going to try something else, get feedback. Oh, that one worked a lot. That was great. I feel really good about that. I'm betting on myself. I'm going to follow that path down the road. This is the kind of thing I'm talking about. Bring the tangibility to it, to the here and now in this moment. And again, I think this can be understood by what we're not talking about. We're not talking about 10-second TikTok videos, flipping through them for an hour, giving you purpose, meaning, or betting on yourself. Like, that's not betting on yourself. And you're like, yeah, Joel, I didn't think it was. I just want to remind you that there's a lot of people in the world, that's their day-to-day experience. They're on social media. They're engaged with other people. They're hearing opinions from all the people around them, and they're acting upon those opinions, and they're not listening to that still small voice within. They're not spending time with themselves. So we're not talking about those things. We're not talking about necessarily just buying wholesale things that are sold to you, whether they're causes, products, services, religious paradigms, whatever. We're talking about thinking for the self, betting on the self, betting that you are the best person to navigate your life. How could anyone else know you better than you know yourself? How could even me and Antonia? We understand type. I could tell you how your mind's wired. I could tell you what motivates you. I could tell you what fears you might have. I could tell you all sorts of things that are going to trip you up, the distractions you're going to focus on, the things that will light you up and attune you. And in fact, we will teach you those things going forward. We're going to be getting more and more programs together to teach you how to align yourself with the streams of life based on your personality type. But at the end of the day, you have to be the one to do that for yourself. I can't do it for you. Antonia can't do it for you. Your parents can't do it for you. Your kids can't do it for you. You're the only one that can actually take action and bet on yourself and make this thing happen.
Yeah. And so it sounds like you're coming around to my way of thinking, Joel.
Yeah.
So, but I'm going to come around to your way of thinking as well, because I'm the person who was like, listen to the discreet voice within. You're like, but it's got to be about action. So you threw me a bone. I'm going to throw you a bone. So here's the action step. Stop waking up and immediately grabbing your phone. Stop every time there's silence in your world, grabbing your phone and looking at it, or grabbing a device and looking at it. When you're at a restaurant and somebody goes to the bathroom, stop grabbing your phone while they're in the bathroom, right? Give yourself moments of silence. When you are driving, don't always put on a podcast. Some of you are listening to this right now while you're driving.
Stop
and you're like,
doing it. Turn it off immediately.
Turn it off immediately.
That's not what we're saying.
No. But what we're saying is sometimes don't listen to a podcast. Sometimes go on your run and allow silence to be a part of it. Sometimes hit the gym and allow it to be quiet. Sometimes drive and allow it to be quiet. Don't grab your TikTok immediately, and when you're trying to defrag, or like you've been really tired and you're just trying to kind of mentally unwind, stop grabbing your device. Stop going through TikTok for 30 minutes. Stop going through Facebook or Twitter, right? All the social media challenges. I just think of social media as a challenge. Channels. Stop looking at Instagram and hating your life because it's not as good as everybody else's, right? Like, stop doing these things. Stop having to have constant and perpetual stimulation. Your brain is getting, like, the neural pathways in your brain are getting shallow, right? They're more and more shallow all the time. We're creating entire generations of people who have shallow neural connections, right? Those little wrinkles in your brain, right? Those are getting more and more shallow all the time. Give yourself an opportunity for silence, for quiet, to get inside yourself, to be your own company. So that's the action step. The action step is to separate yourself and detox and stop being addicted to all the noise in the outside world. Just be present with the self. Is that enough of an action step for you, Joel?
I love action steps because they always cut through the clutter, right? I do think those are great action steps. They're really challenging to do. What I love to always think about is what is a meta action that can make all those actions more doable. And I would say that in my life, if I had to go from ground zero, living my day-to-day existence, maybe back when I had a day job, and just stop doing things that I enjoyed, like that were habits, like getting on my device or tuning into other things, it would have been really challenging. And it was only after I got on mission purpose that those things stopped being difficult to stop doing. Like, it was easier for me. It's a lot easier for me now to not just get on my device when I wake up first thing in the morning, because I have a passion I'm working toward. I've got something that I'm living for. And so I think that's me betting on myself again, is I'm taking meta action to say, what is it that I'm here to do today? Not solve the problems of tomorrow, but what am I here to do today? What is my purpose today? And it could be a small purpose. It could be spending time with my kids. and really pouring into their lives and showing them that I'm a loving dad that cares about their experience. That could be my today's purpose. It doesn't have to be, put water wells all over the planet or something. It could be something very tangible and small. That's my purpose for today. Or recording this podcast. That's my purpose for today. That is legitimately my purpose. I'm on my purpose. And am I on my phone right now on social media? Heck no. I'm on my purpose. I'm talking to you right now. I'm talking with Antonia right now. The three of us are having a conversation. Yeah, you don't have a mic. We get it. We'll hear from you at the end. You don't have a mic right now, but you're in this conversation with us. The three of us are conversing and talking about these ideas and exploring possibilities. And so all those other actions are so much easier when I'm on that mission or purpose.
I thought about one more: betting on yourself. Like you just mentioned, it becomes so much easier to have a fast of the information that is competing to get inside of us when you have other things that you are doing proactively. And the challenge, and this might almost feel like a catch-22, is it's hard to know what that purpose is until you have a fast, until you remove yourself from it. So part of betting on yourself is having the faith that that message will come to you, as difficult as it is. I don't know anybody who isn't addicted to their devices, right? 100% of people I know grab their phones as fast as they can in any moment of silence. Okay, maybe not 100%, but the numbers are up there, right? Just kind of like not 100% of people are addicted to sugar, but enough are where you can fudge the numbers and almost make it 100%, right? So we have addiction issues, massive, massive addiction issues. And we have to bet on ourselves to get over these addictions. We have to have faith in our ability to detox from this information assault and have faith that we're going to find that discrete voice inside to be able to know why we're here, to have that purpose, to then get into that slipstream, that energetic slipstream where we will not be addicted to our device anymore. And that's part of betting on ourselves. Part of betting on ourselves is that we will be able to know what we're supposed to be doing, whatever that is, even if it's a very simple life, that we will have the self-responsibility and the sovereignty to follow that and cut out all the noise, that we have the ability to hear that voice inside of us if we detox from all these devices, and that we will be able to live a full life where we don't have all of these coping mechanisms. All these addictions are coping mechanisms, that we won't have to have them all. And we'll have that sense of heightened self-sovereignty, heightened self-responsibility, that we will be in that energy that we were meant to be in. And that's part of betting on ourselves.
We're going to keep talking about these themes, these ideas, these ways to connect personality type, self-understanding, to action, to making things different in your life, to getting the results you want, to living a life that you feel, if you have that little mini deathbed moment at the end of your day, metaphorically speaking, I hope you're not going to die tonight. I hope you're going to be safe and well, and all the people you love safe and well as well. But if you have that little mini deathbed metaphorical moment tonight, you can look back and go, wow, today was a joyful day. Today was a powerful day. Today was a day on purpose. Today felt meaningful to me. I feel really good about it. I liked what happened in this day. Wouldn't it be cool if you could have that experience every night, every single night for the rest of your life? And I'm talking about that experience even when stuff went wrong for that day, like disaster hit, still having that experience at night going, I'm living a meaningful life. I lived a joyful day. I had an experience today. I'm grateful for those experiences, even though they were tough or challenging or happened to me. I'm betting on myself for the future. That's what we want for you. So we're going to keep talking about this in this short series we're doing. What do you think? Like I mentioned a little bit earlier, you're the third person here in this conversation, but you haven't had a microphone. We want to hear from you. Come over to personalityhacker.com directly below this episode. Leave a comment, ask a question. More importantly, share your personal story. What's coming up for you? This is kind of a free form. We went abstract, we went practical, we went all over the place. We talked about betting on yourself. What does that look like for you? If you were to bet on yourself, how would this change your life? What would you start to do to bet on your own life?
Yeah. And if you want to come over to say, I guess I'm not listening to the podcast anymore.
No.
Well, we're one of the few you should still keep listening to. That feels very empowered. That feels like, you're doing.
Oh, you're saying based on our recommendation of not like of the silence.
Yeah,
I thought you meant they were
exactly.
turned off by the message. I'm like, I think it's a great message.
No, we basically said turn off.
I see what you're saying.
Turn off all the noise, and they're like, well, I guess I can't listen to the podcast anymore.
No, this is good noise.
Yeah, this is good noise.
But see, we're selfish. We want you to keep listening to us in a way. And you do have to evaluate, am I going to listen to what they're telling me or do my own thing and bet on myself? And you should bet on yourself.
I think they should bet on themselves, right? So if this is the wrong thing for you, well, then you got to stop listening. But if you enjoyed this podcast and you'd like to hear more because this is part of you betting on yourself, which very well may be, you're the only person who knows, you can subscribe to us on iTunes and various Android platforms. And if you leave us a rating and review on iTunes, it helps us out a lot. We have a book. It's called Personality Hacker. You can get it at all major book retailers. And if you leave us a rating and review on Amazon or on Goodreads, that also helps us out a lot. When I say that, for those of you who listen to us all the time, it probably just sounds droning, like you've heard me say that a million times. But I'm going to repeat, it helps us out a lot. So if you've gotten value from our podcast and you would like to have just a moment of reciprocity, 5 minutes or less, an iTunes review, an Amazon review if you have the book, and a Goodreads review, all of those would be gifts to us. We would be very grateful.
I would also argue it's gifts to other people because I think people find benefit from this. And by you rating and reviewing things, other people find it. They also get benefit. It's not just self-focused.
That's right. It's an act of philanthropy.
See what I did there?
Philanthropic to leave a rating and review. You will be a good person. You will signal your virtue to all. All right. So we also have a suite of programs that are designed to help you grow as an individual using your personality type as a guide. We have for INFJs and INFPs a program called Empowered, which addresses the major issues that people of your type go through and gives you a council of very wise people to help you navigate through those challenges and get you empowered for life. We also have a program called Unleashed. It's for INTJs and INTPs. Once again, a council of INTJs and INTPs that give you recommendations for getting over the biggest challenges that you may face, including social awareness, emotional intelligence, and motivation. So go check that out. For those of you who have intuition as something you lean on heavily, we have Intuitive Awakening, which is a program that encourages you to use that tool of intuition so that you can rely on it and you can feel a sense of resting into the self by using your intuition. And we also have a program that is designed to help you with body-mind practices called Young on Yoga or Personality Types in Yoga. Actually, one program that we recently created, which I think was pretty darn good, is a program called Tools for Emotional Survival. It goes through all the personality types and talks about how they address stress, how they address senses of uncertainty, how you should be seeing self-care for your personality type specifically, and how to remain optimistic in a world that's difficult to remain optimistic in it. And that is for all personality types. So go check those out at the catalog and see which one is right for you.
Yeah, bet on yourself and go get a program that's right for you.
Right.
Do it now. Go bet on yourself right now.
Or stop listening to us forever, right? These are your options.
Don't do that. Don't do that. Bet on yourself and get a program and then listen in next week and we're going to be right back with more of this. My name is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
And we'll talk with you as we continue this discussion on the next Personality Hacker podcast. If you're focused on personal growth, I think you'll resonate with our core content over at personalityhacker.com. We want to see you understand how your mind is wired so you can generate motivation, improve social skills, find career opportunities, and master excellent decision making. But a quick warning, we are advice and action focused in all of our articles, podcasts, and videos. This means that we attract people who like to be challenged to become excellent, to take action, to put in the work to optimize themselves, not simply just gather more information. If you are committed to personal growth and ready to radically find your inner truth, then come over and be a part of our growing community of like minds at Personality Hacker.